Bill Maher thought a subtle jab would be enough, and that he could move on. But Jasmine Crockett's composed, cutting response changed the room, and the internet, entirely. The green room at CBS Television City in Los Angeles was cold, not in temperature, but in atmosphere, polished to the point of alienation. Jasmine sat quietly, elbows resting on the armrests, her phone screen dimming in her hand. A young assistant had just stepped out, politely reminding her she had 10 minutes before going live with Maher. She inhaled, not to calm nerves. This wasn't her first time on national television, but there was a heaviness to this moment. 2 days earlier, her communications director had called, warning her about the tone of the invitation. "They're framing it as a discussion on polarization and civility," the director had said. "But if Maher goes where I think he might, it'll be baiting. Just be ready." Jasmine hadn't responded immediately. She was used to panels that began with handshakes and ended with smirks. What was different now was the silence when she arrived. No one asked if she needed water, no introductions to the other guests. Muffled voices in the hallway stopped abruptly when she stepped into the green room. She didn't need validation. She already had it. Her assistant, leaned through the door. Jasmine stood, adjusted her powder blue blazer, clean lines, no flash, and examined herself in the mirror. No cracks. No room for them, not here. As they moved toward the set, she passed the wall of black and white portraits of icons. Men in suits, men with opinions, men who had never been required to measure their tone for fear of being labeled angry on cable television. On stage, she offered Maher a polite smile. He nodded faintly and gestured toward her seat, as if holding back a joke. Then the lights came up, the applause sign blinked, the theme song played, and they were live. Maher leaned in, half smiling. "Our next guest is a rising Democratic congresswoman from Texas. Young, sharp, and possibly the future of the party. Unless emotion gets in the way." The audience chuckled lightly. Jasmine tilted her head slightly. Not in confusion, but in calculation. She crossed her legs, hands folded calmly. "Good to be here," she said, voice steady. Maher's smile tightened. "Let's start simple. Why do so many progressives these days feel the need to moralize everything?" She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she blinked slowly, acknowledging the question as if she had been expecting it. What followed wasn't anger. It was something colder, sharper, and far more dangerous to anyone assuming they could handle her. Jasmine leaned forward just slightly. Not in confrontation, but just enough to occupy her space. She kept her tone measured, almost moralizing. "I think you mean standing up for people who don't usually get heard." Maher smirked. "Right, but don't you think passion sometimes gets in the way of governing? A lot of yelling, not a lot of results. It's like everyone's trying to go viral instead of get things done." A few people in the audience chuckled, a polite, uncertain laugh, the kind you give when you aren't sure if it's a joke or a jab. Jasmine didn't smile. "I get it," she said calmly. "Young people, especially young women, especially young black women, get labeled emotional when we care too much, or angry when we speak directly. Meanwhile, someone else can lose their temper, curse on air, and it's called passion. Interesting, isn't it?" Maher shifted in his seat. "You're making this about identity. I'm talking about approach. People want solutions, not lectures." Jasmine leaned forward slightly, her tone steady, precise. "You can't separate identity from approach. If someone spends their life watching their communities overlooked, underfunded, and blamed for problems they didn't create, what do you expect them to sound like when they finally get the mic?" The audience quieted, not uncomfortable, but attentive. Maher raised an eyebrow. "But isn't that the problem? The mic's become a weapon instead of a tool. Every moment's a chance to clap back. Congress is almost like a stage now." Jasmine chuckled, not out of humor, but because the setup was too easy. "You know what's wild?" she said. "It's always been a stage. You just never noticed when the same people were writing every act. Now someone new is reading from the script. Suddenly it's performative." A voice from the audience whispered, "Whoa!" Others began nodding subtly. The camera lingered on Maher's face. He reached for his water. Okay, so let's take the emotion out of it. Policy-wise, what's actually being done?" "That depends," Jasmine replied. "Do you mean what's being proposed or what's being blocked?" "Let's take voting rights," she said. I helped draft language that would have made it easier for working people to vote. More polling places, stronger mail-in options, protections for people with disabilities. That's structural, not emotional. But every time we bring it up, someone accuses us of overreaching. So, who's really holding progress back? Maher shrugged. Maybe it's just not that simple. No, she said plainly. It is that simple. What's complicated is justifying systems that work for some while pretending they work for everyone. The audience murmured. This wasn't the standard back and forth they expected. No punchlines, no forced laughs. Just a deeper conversation, and only one participant looked at ease. Maher crossed one leg, gave a tight smile. Sounds like a good soundbite. Jasmine didn't blink. Maybe, she thought, or maybe it sounds different because I don't need to raise my voice to make the point. Maher wasn't finished. He leaned back, smile slipping into something colder, more calculated. His fingers tapped the armrest once, then again. Well, he said slowly, you talk a lot about how hard it is for women like you, but isn't part of leadership being able to take criticism without calling it oppression? The sentence landed heavy, not loud, not clever, but carrying a smug undertone. You're not allowed to call this what it is. For a moment, Jasmine didn't respond. She looked at him, really looked, not as a sparring partner, but as a man expecting an answer he thought he already had. Then she turned slightly toward the audience. Not theatrically, just enough to acknowledge them. She didn't smile. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't blink more than usual. But her tone changed. It slowed. Sharpened. Let me ask you something, she said quietly. If I sit here and explain how certain systems push people to the margins, and your first instinct is to say, I'm playing victim, what does that say about how you listen? Silence. Real silence. No coughs, no whispers, no chuckles. She continued. I'm not oppressed because someone disagrees with me. I'm pointing out a pattern. And the moment I name that pattern, suddenly the conversation shifts to whether I'm being too sensitive. Not whether the pattern exists. That's not debate. That's deflection. The camera cut to Maher. His expression faltered, just a flicker, subtle, but enough for that moment where someone realizes they might not fully control the narrative. Jasmine stayed steady. Let's be real, she said. You've built a career on saying the uncomfortable thing. You pride yourself on pushing back against the mainstream. But when a black woman does the same thing, when she challenges you directly, you don't call it brave, you call it emotional. A woman in the audience clapped, then another, then half the room. Maher raised his hand, trying to wave them down, smirking, but the gesture lacked authority. All right. Let's keep it civil, he said. Jasmine turned back to him, calm as ever. I am being civil, she said. I'm just not being small. The line cut through the room. It wasn't delivered with fire. It didn't need to be. Its power lay in the truth behind it. Years of experience, restraint, and precision packed into one sentence. It was more than a response. It was a correction, a boundary freshly drawn. Even Maher couldn't spin it. He leaned back, exhaling sharply, part scoff, part surrender. He reached for his notes, hands moving a little faster than before, like he'd lost his rhythm. The audience noticed, not because they were explicitly on Jasmine's side, but because for once, the story wasn't filtered through sarcasm or spectacle. It was two worlds colliding, and the quieter one was winning. Jasmine didn't push further. She sat back, adjusted her blazer slightly, and waited for the next question. But the real shift came after the show ended, when the world started talking. The credits had barely finished rolling when Ree rushed in, wide-eyed, holding Jasmine's phone. You're trending. Jasmine raised an eyebrow as she peeled off her microphone. Number 2 on X and climbing. She took the phone from him. Mentions were flooding in. Some were screenshots, others short clips, 15 seconds or less, looping her words, I'm not being small. They were edited into GIFs, memes overlaid with dramatic music, white bold text reading, say that again. She exhaled through her nose. They're going to twist it. They already are, Ree replied. But you should see the comments. People are eating it up. This isn't just political Twitter. It's everyone. The producers didn't come in to say goodbye. No post-show handshake, no follow-up. Just the usual assistant with a quick, you're clear, before walking away. That was fine. Jasmine wasn't looking for a debrief on the drive back to the hotel. Her inbox was already full. Staffers, journalists, friends from Dallas. Some messages were proud, some in awe, others simple. Damn, her mother raised you right. That man thought he had you. You proved he didn't. Praise wasn't the only thing buzzing. By the time she reached the hotel elevator, a headline was live. Congresswoman Crockett lashes out at Bill Maher in on-air clash. She stared, shook her head once, then handed the phone back to Ree. Lashes out, she muttered. Every time a woman sets a boundary, it's violence. Ree didn't respond. He pressed the elevator button and looked down. Jasmine finally removed her heels. The hotel room was quiet, heavy but familiar. She flipped on the muted news to see herself on screen. Talking without sound, a panel debated whether she'd gone too far. One commentator said, "This is why Democrats struggle. They alienate people with this tone." Another countered, "She didn't raise her voice once, she was surgical." Jasmine didn't watch long. She sat, rubbed the arch of her foot, reached for the remote, but just as she was about to turn off the TV, her phone vibrated again. Unknown number. Washington, D.C. area code. She let it ring twice before answering. "This is Jasmine." A male voice. Calm, controlled Congresswoman Crockett. "This is Ed Ramos at CNN. We'd love to have you on tomorrow morning to follow up on tonight." She paused. "I'll have my team get back to you," she said eventually. Ree asked, "You want me to say no?" Jasmine leaned back, looking at the dark city outside. "I want you to say we'll think about it." That's the truth. She didn't need to rush into another mic, another headline, or another table waiting to misread her on purpose. She wasn't running. She just didn't want to be a single moment. Across social media, people were quoting her. Not hashtags or slogans, but reflections of lived experience. Some shared workplace stories. We were told to smile more, talk less, not take things personally. Others posted about raising daughters to speak without apology. It wasn't just politics. It was personal. Jasmine scrolled through more posts, anonymous messages, staff notes, and one that stood out. A high school girl from Columbus, Ohio, holding a sticky note with Jasmine's quote in Sharpie, "I'm not being small." By morning, the wave had grown. The backlash was louder than ever. By 7 a.m., headlines multiplied. Clap back, fiery exchange, Congresswoman torches Maher. But underneath the digital flare, something deeper emerged. Cable news panels debated. Morning radio weighed in. Podcasts released emergency episodes. Some called her brave, others divisive. One conservative host compared her to an activist in a suit, as if that was an insult. Back in Dallas, Jasmine sat at her kitchen counter, reheated coffee filling the air. The news droned on. Interruptions, deflections, subtle dismissals, now distilled into a viral clip. A man from the Capitol called her office that afternoon, respecting the spirit of her words but warning, "The press doesn't treat these moments kindly. You made them uncomfortable. Don't do it again." Jasmine didn't flinch. She'd known the risks walking into that studio. What surprised her was the response from some colleagues. An older congressman she once respected tweeted about decorum and unity without naming her. But everyone knew. Some moderate pundits urged restraint on both sides, as if speaking plainly was equivalent to being dismissive on national television. Jasmine didn't respond. No quote tweet. No Instagram live. She stayed silent deliberately. Instead, she met with her staff, made a few calls to grassroots leaders, and spoke to high schoolers in Garland over Zoom. One girl said, "I felt seen." That part didn't make headlines. No one noticed the restraint it took. Not shouting, not cutting anyone off, sitting measured and responding with clarity. Sometimes, not reacting required more strength than speaking out. Still, it gnawed at her how quickly the world wanted a moment, reduced to a meme or a savage comeback, rather than recognizing it as an intentional act of self-respect. Later that evening, she sat at her desk, alone. The laptop screen lit her face. Emails, statements, interview prep. It could wait. She opened her journal, a black leather notebook, and wrote 5 words. Not loud. Clear enough. Then she closed the book. She wasn't chasing the camera. She wasn't looking for applause, But she also wasn't going to sit quietly while someone else decided how she should show up. The weight of that choice, the line she drew, would follow her long after the trending hashtags faded. A week passed. The internet had moved on to the next controversy. A celebrity divorce, a leaked video, another political scandal brewing in Ohio. Jasmine's clip still circulated, shared occasionally, often with captions like, "This is how you do it." But the noise had thinned. Jasmine didn't mind. She didn't crave attention. What stayed with her were the quiet, real conversations that followed. Like the woman in her district, mid-50s, an administrative worker at a public school, who pulled Jasmine aside at a town hall in Mesquite and whispered, "I've sat in meetings where men spoke over me for years. You said the thing I never could." There was a smile, but also a hint of sadness. "I just wish I'd said it sooner." Or the retired pastor from Longview who left a voicemail, "I didn't agree with you, but I respected how you carried yourself." That's how grown folks should talk. Keep speaking plainly. These moments, quiet honesty, grounded Jasmine more than any headline ever could. They also reminded her why what happened on that stage mattered. It wasn't just about clapping back or winning an argument. It was about setting a standard. There's a pressure that comes with her position. Not just as a politician, but as a black woman in rooms where decisions are made before she speaks and judged more harshly afterward. People often say, just focus on policy. But when identity is treated as a distraction, neutrality becomes a luxury you can't afford. She thought about that as she spoke to a group of interns visiting from smaller Texas colleges. They sat around a long conference table, notebooks open, eyes wide. One young man from Latch asked, "How do you decide when to speak up and when to stay quiet?" Jasmine leaned back in her chair. "You don't wait for the moment to feel safe," she said. "You speak when the silence feels heavier than the risk." They wrote it down. Another intern asked, "How do you stay calm when people talk down to you?" Jasmine smiled. "I do get angry, but I've learned anger doesn't need to be loud to be real. You don't always need volume to hold power." That wasn't something she'd read in a book. It was earned from rooms where her tone was scrutinized more than her ideas, from moments when she wanted to explode but chose not to. Not out of fear, but because she understood the impact of stillness. After the meeting, one intern lingered, nervous hands fidgeting. "I want to run for office one day, but I don't think people will take me seriously. I talk fast. I get emotional. People say I care too much." Jasmine looked at her with gentle steadiness. "Keep caring," she said. "That's the part they're scared of." They stood quietly for a moment before the girl smiled and walked out, scribbling notes. Jasmine stayed at the window after they left, watching cars move slowly below. Out there, everything felt noisy, but in this moment, it felt clear. She knew her words on Maher's show had traveled far, but what mattered most was where they landed. That line, "I'm not being small," wasn't just for a viral moment. It was a reminder that strength isn't always loud, clarity carries weight, and refusing to shrink is its own kind of power. Even with all that, the story wasn't finished, at least not until people watching understood what it meant for them. There's a kind of silence that follows after a public moment. It's not peace. It's the silence that asks, "What now for Jasmine?" That question doesn't come with panic. It comes with responsibility. Most people will never appear on live television, never sit across from a host with millions watching, never get quoted or turned into a trending hashtag. But they will be in rooms where they are spoken over, in jobs where their competence is questioned the moment they speak, in conversations where someone smiles while making them smaller. That's where the story lives now. Not in the clip, but in its reflection. A young teacher in Tulsa sent Jasmine a handwritten letter. She said she played the clip in her classroom, not for politics, but for posture. "We talk a lot about bullying," the teacher wrote, "but rarely teach what it looks like to stand up for yourself." A man in his 60s from rural Oregon wrote 2 letters. "I didn't agree with you on much," he admitted, "but I saw how calm you were. I've never seen someone take a hit and respond without throwing one back. That stuck with me." That was the legacy of the moment. It wasn't that Jasmine Crockett won a debate. It was that she gave people something they didn't know they needed. Permission to be firm without being cruel, to take up space without apologizing, to respond without retaliation in a culture obsessed with clapbacks and takedowns. That kind of presence is rare and powerful. The deeper message. You don't have to yell to be heard, you don't have to shrink to be accepted, and you don't owe anyone a version of yourself that makes them more comfortable. When Jasmine walked into that studio, she wasn't looking to go viral. She was there to talk about policy, but what she left with was louder than any headline. A blueprint for every woman told she's too much, every young person told they're not realistic, every black voice told to calm down when speaking clearly. This story is a reminder. You don't need permission to be whole. You don't need applause to be right. You don't need to change your tone to fit someone else's comfort zone. If you're watching and wondering how this connects to you, ask yourself, where have you made yourself smaller just to survive a room? Where have you backed down? Not because you were wrong, but because you feared judgment. And more importantly, what would happen if you stopped? What if next time someone tried to define your worth by your delivery, you looked them straight in the eye and said, "I'm not being small"? The moment you do, everything shifts. People will feel it. Some will respect it. Some will resent it. But no one will forget it, and neither will you. If this story resonates, share it. Send it to someone who needs the reminder. Speak the words out loud if you have to. Subscribe for stories that don't just inform, but reflect something real. Truths you don't have to shout to believe in your own voice.